Hey everybody, thanks for joining me in the Ant Panda channel. Man Panda, apologies as the voice is kind of running in and out, mainly because of all the madness with allergies and all that jazz. Anyway, I just wanted to take a moment and actually reflect upon one of the greatest reveals that I recall that made me so hyped about a game in the past, and that is the Resident Evil 2 Remake. At E3, it was revealed that Resident Evil 2 Remake was going to come out, and the hype for this particular game was incredible. And I remember I myself couldn't believe it when it first revealed, and I had to watch it several times. But I feel it's important, to really take a second and just kind of reflect on and take a look at some of the greatest gaming achievements in this landscape. I know a lot of folks are very focused on the future and all the new stuff that's coming out, but sometimes it's good to take a step back, look at kind of the great development that occurred, especially in the way of remakes, and Resident Evil 2. I can't really in my head say that there hasn't been a better remake that's come out. Even with the more recent Oblivion remake and others, Resident Evil 2 will always stand out as my favorite and probably the best, just the way that they handled it, or Capcom did, for as long as they did, and in my opinion it was well worth the wait. So let's take a look at the E3 reveal, compare the intro of the current story, and just kind of see and reflect and think about some of the changes that happened there, and really kind of try to answer the question, was this really in-game footage, or did they really make this as a separate video? As we look into the comparison of the E3 reveal and to the normal gameplay, we can notice some differences that occurred when it was revealed, which really does kind of signify it's a bit more of an MVP or in-game
Anybody there?
footage. One of the first things to note, though, is that with the normal gameplay and versus what they had in the past, Leon doesn't actually come in with his RPD uniform. His normal outfit actually is his coat and his button-up shirt. But we'll go ahead and switch it over just so that we get the full effect. Another thing too, you're going to already notice some similarities is with some of the textures of some of the food products. The blue Fruit Loops, the tomato cans, and even the beer cans are all very similar and the same as to what was in the reveal itself. As we move kind of forward into it, we'll look and we'll see the actual room of the intro, which does reflect a lot of similarities, but also a lot of major differences.
Stop moving.
Officer, you need help?
Stay back, sir. I got this.
Freeze! I'll shoot! Son of a bitch.
So the first thing that you point out and can actually notice, the sheriff himself actually doesn't look all that different. In fact, he looks pretty much the same. You might have some finalization that was done, and the same thing with Leon's face, as we do look closer into what he looks like. There's definitely some improvements that were made, but it definitely was still pretty similar to the E3 reveal. You'll notice that also the zombie, his particular face was also improved. But it looks like the graphic, the gore, and the pieces that were actually gnawed off are actually quite similar. There's definitely some improvements and changes that were made. The other thing too is the texture and use of some of the shelving here is pretty much the same that you saw the mouse crawl up to. And like I mentioned before, the tomato cans, the Fruit Loop cans, which are textures, which is pretty much for all boxes for the most part, some kind of without, are actually quite the same. It hasn't been changed upon either. The alcohol and the beverages that were used in the E3 that you can notice, surprisingly enough, is also very similar. The pizza box looks quite different, but also the pizza textures, the actual placement of the ashtray and the way that looked was also very similar. And I strongly do believe that maybe the mouse itself might have originated here in between these boxes in a small field of view, but also encapsulating kind of a little bit more of the room. The other thing too is that the overhead light is a light bulb instead of overhang lights and fluorescent. We don't see any fluorescent actual lights here. It actually, I think, is a base more a bit into Raccoon City itself. But as you know, the mouse itself probably crawled upon this particular placement and probably these two shelves here and moved across. In the placement of the actual E3 reveal, it shows that probably one of these would have fallen over. I would have probably assumed this one. And when it did, obviously our demise of our mouse had occurred right here, where the end of him would focus out to actually show Leon probably at this particular location, pointing his gun and revealing that it is Leon Kennedy for the Resident Evil 2 Remake reveal. It's pretty spectacular that there's some similarities. There are some variations, finalization, and changes that were made from that, but it's probably a good conclusion to make that most likely all of that was in-game footage, because an MVP, or a minimum viable product, probably occurred during development at that time, and the placement of the room itself, the way it was formulated, was probably quite different, and it probably was made a bit different in order to ensure that they had a good player experience and changes. And honestly, I think it's incredible what they did. To be able to say that a reveal at E3 or into some demo that pops up, and then be able to say that there are some similarities and things that are still there versus what the final product is quite an incredible feat versus just changing an unreleased version. Well, that about does it. Thanks for joining me on this nostalgic journey a few years ago of the reveal for Resident Evil 2. And feel free to hit a like and subscribe. And I'll catch you in the next video. Take care.